Republicans were looking to turn out the vote, and they were eyeing at least receiving about 24% of the vote. We now see Harris leading former President Donald Trump in Dane County, 75 to 24%. What are some of the takeaways of those numbers?
Amber, competing boos and cheers could be heard ringing through the crowd during Democratic Governor Tony Evers' address tonight, a rare chance to experience the performative display of partisan interactions between the legislative and executive branches. Former U.S. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn returned to the Badger State on Tuesday, condemning President Donald Trump's recent action to pardon nearly 1,500 people charged in connection to the January 6th insurrection. These workers hitting picket lines in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Philadelphia, unionized Starbucks workers here in Madison joining the calls for the company to deliver on its promises for fair labor practices. Thank you for joining us. I'm Darrielle Fair. President Donald Trump was sworn in for his second term as president on Monday, and within his first week, he rolled out an extensive list of executive orders relating to changes in immigration policies at the southern border. And Gwen, final question, just to take a step away from politics. Over the past week, Democratic governors dressed up as your husband, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, for Halloween. Can I get your reaction on some of those costumes? Vice President Kamala Harris wrapped up her remarks here in Dane County earlier today, a deep blue area where voter turnout could prove to be decisive in this year's November election. Wisconsin Super PAC with Republican ties, Badger Values PAC, has funded over $300,000 to your campaign. You've also accepted support from Republican allies to keep your name on the ballot across the battleground states. What do you say to those who argue your campaign is a spoiler working to help former President Donald Trump win the presidency? You've said in the past that Vice President Harris is progressive, but on the issues of the economy and immigration, do you feel that she is making her case to those independent and moderate voters that will be critical in this election? Vice President Kamala Harris speaking to a crowd of more than 13,000 people here in Dane County. The Harris campaign attempting to appeal to young voters and University of Wisconsin students, a demographic that densely populates the Madison area. Presidential nominees have traditionally had a final exchange in a nationally televised October debate after the vice presidential nominees debate. Is the campaign not concerned that Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, will have the final say on the debate stage before November? Wisconsin is now the third key swing state to make a court decision addressing Robert F. Kennedy's ballot status, including Michigan and North Carolina, as Republicans attempt to garner support among his base. As in-person early voting kicked off across Wisconsin today, former President Barack Obama and vice presidential Democratic nominee Minnesota Governor Tim Walz campaigning in Madison, a Democratic stronghold, to appeal to voters on what they say will be a new path forward. A case before the Wisconsin Supreme Court aims to reinstate absentee ballot drop boxes in the state's elections, challenging a previous decision by the court's then conservative majority, arguing their use was unconstitutional under current Wisconsin law. Former President Donald Trump campaigning in Dane County on Tuesday, a Democratic stronghold, Trump touching on the economy and attacking Vice President Harris's record on foreign policy, crime, and immigration. There's been an outpouring of commemoration and remembrance for former President Jimmy Carter, and that news has been felt here across the state, especially for one Wisconsin student who now holds an interesting piece of Carter's legacy.
Kind of gives a glimpse into the past and what people were worried about, what people desired into a presidency. My collection, well, certainly not the largest, is a good representation.
Caden Mayer, a student at UW-Platteville, has a collection of more than 500 Jimmy Carter pins, a small historical archive that sits in his basement. The hobby, he says, begins when his aunt first introduced him to antiques as a child.
I kind of wanted to give kind of a tribute and my nod to how much progress Jimmy Carter made in his presidency. So I got an old banner from my sister's graduation party and started pinning on buttons to it.
His collection shortly growing over time. Caden's mom, Kathy Mayer, says his passion for history started when he was young.
Caden, ever since he was probably, I guess, maybe early middle school or even the end of elementary school, loved to read any kind of history book he could get his hands on. The collection that my son's, collected throughout the last few years, it's a treasure.
Former President Jimmy Carter and the First Lady were the longest married presidential couple in U.S. history. President Jimmy Carter's official state funeral will be held on January 9th, the same day as a national day of mourning announced by President Joe Biden on the day of his passing. In Madison, I'm Darrielle Fair. This event honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. served as an opportunity to highlight his work rooted in advancing the Black community and to celebrate those for their continued advocacy towards equality for all people of color.
This little light of mine, I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors and not be discouraged because they had a song in their heart. They had spirit in their calling.
The event is the oldest official MLK state celebration in the nation, and the theme for this year was Justice Lives Here. Dr. King led the civil rights movement from 1955 through 1968, a period in time when African Americans challenged racial segregation in what would come to be known as the Jim Crow era.
Dr. King taught us there was no justice in classrooms overcrowded with hungry kids experiencing trauma, and jails that are full while factories sit empty.
The event, featuring performances from the MLK Multicultural Dance Collective, community leaders were given the MLK Heritage Award for their service in addressing systemic issues impacting communities of color. Milwaukee County Supervisor Marcelia Nicholson making a final call to action for members within the Black community to continue to be change agents.
Remember, Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott by the age of 25. You are not too young. You are not too weak. Remember that a shepherd boy named David defeated the giant Goliath with only a sling and a stone.
The service ending with the song We Shall Overcome, an anthem for African Americans during the civil rights movement and a symbol of their fight to overcome racial injustice. In Madison, I'm Darrielle Fair. President Donald Trump is now citing without evidence that diversity, equity, and inclusion hires could be to blame for Wednesday's deadly mid-air collision between a commercial plane and Army helicopter in Washington.
The FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so.
When asked by reporters how the president could come to the conclusion that DEI initiatives were related ahead of an investigation.
Because I have common sense, okay?
Trump attacking the Federal Aviation Administration's DEI programs and its efforts to hire employees with disabilities, claiming the Obama and Biden administrations lowered air traffic controller requirements to support DEI. The president's comments come as he signed a series of executive orders last week to dismantle DEI initiatives and positions in the federal government. Democratic Representative of Wisconsin Mark Pocan called the incident a tragedy before criticizing Trump's response as an effort to further his political agenda on DEI.
All they're doing is appealing back to the base, and a large part of the MAGA base is racist. So this is the dog whistle for those folks to understand that Donald Trump is doing something for them, when in reality, we still have a lot of work to do to have equality in this country, and that's part of why we had many of the DEI initiatives.
And now the New York Times obtained an internal report concluding that the controller on duty at the time of the accident was doing a job typically handled by two people. In Madison, I'm Darrielle Fair.